What's up, everybody? Hopefully, this episode is reaching you guys in 2020. Hopefully, this is our first episode of 2020. I'm not sure how that last episode we recorded, when it will be released, because there's been a lot of technical issues on my end with my recording software. But here we are. I got Eric today joined with me. Eric, how are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm great, man. It's December 30th is the time of the recording of this, and Susan and I are heading out tomorrow to go to San Antonio. And thanks to your Busch Gardens connections, we're going to SeaWorld for free. So thank you for that. And also a couple of days after that, the Oklahoma City Thunder, my team, are coming into San Antonio to play the Spurs. So I will be going to my first ever NBA game. I will be wearing my Thunder shirt in hostile territory. So if I don't make it back, that'll probably be why. It's a battle between like an average, like two pretty meh teams in the NBA right now. So I doubt it will be too hostile, but I'm still excited to go to my first NBA game.
Yeah.
So definitely I'll be taking pictures. I'll post some on Twitter and stuff. So definitely looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, man. Can't wait to hear how that goes. I've been to only one NBA game myself, and even though we were sitting way up in the upper rafters of the building, the Magic ended up winning by like 20, 25 points against the Hawks, and it's pretty cool. It was like there was no real stars at the game, so it was kind of a starless game. But Dwight Howard at that time was on the Atlanta Hawks, and Orlando Magic fans know that Dwight Howard is public enemy number one. So even though it's been like 10 years, even though it's been like 10 years since the whole debacle went down, I still, it was a noticeable, rant of boos coming down whenever he took a free throw attempt or touched the ball. I mean, it was crazy. Like even when they just passed him the ball, everybody started booing really loud. Like even if he just like, yeah, and it lasted all game long. So I gotta say that is definitely no love lost between that fan base and Dwight Howard. But I'm not sure if there's going to be any big stars in the San Antonio game. I guess you got Aldridge there.
Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge and like Chris Paul for the Thunder, but like that's probably going to be it really. But what I'm kind of hoping is that ticket prices actually like plummeted for the game, and so I'm hoping, like, because I'm doing the same thing like as you, like we got tickets like farther up in the rafters, so the view might not be very good. But what I'm kind of hoping happens is that it'll be kind of a low attendance game, and like maybe we can like move our way down a little closer or something, and get a little better view like later in the game or something. But regardless, even if we have to stay up there the whole time, like it's my first NBA game, like I'm super excited about it. So hopefully, I don't know, man. I've had a bad curse in sports lately though, where like when I go to a game for my team, that it's been a while since the team that I was there for actually won a game that I've been at. Like it's been bad, this curse. I don't know how people. I don't even know if like you or Connor know that, but like it's been bad, man.
Well, I know. Yeah.
What were you saying? I haven't been to a ton of sporting events since I moved to Texas, but like when my parents came in, we went to an Indians game against the Astros, and the Astros won. We went to the Jags game in Dallas last season.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know how that went. Like I still get nightmares about that game. And when I was in Jacksonville one time, I went to I think you were at the same game, but when they were playing the Texans and the Jaguars lost that game. So I'm at a bit of a curse right now, but maybe hopefully the curse will be broken on January 2nd. Maybe I can finally go to a game where the team that I want to win actually wins the game.
Hopefully.
We'll see. I'm not getting my hopes up just yet, but the Thunder have been surprisingly decent this season, and which is definitely way above their expectations. So maybe I'll be on the right end of the stick this time.
Yeah, I think that'd be a toss-up game if I were to predict it, because the Spurs haven't been anything special either. So it's in San Antonio, that gives them an advantage. But yeah, I'll be looking forward. I'll be scoreboard watching that one while you're there. So
oh yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah.
This game's
right,
not going to be on national TV or anything,
no.
so you're probably not going to be able to watch it.
No. Won't be able to see it, but hey, I'll get the pictures and stuff from you. So
there you go.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's get started though, because the NFL playoffs are about to begin, and this is what I'd say a good chunk of episodes that we've produced throughout this series of the podcast have been leading up to this moment. I mean, you get all the division episodes we did back in the summer. Every single team in every single division was covered extensively, maybe a little too much, but we did all that work.
We'll make some tweaks for next year, but
yeah, we'll be tweaking things next year, but still, we did a lot of work on every single team leading up to this season. I'd say for the first half of the season, we did prediction episodes before each individual NFL week. We kind of stopped doing that halfway through the season, but throughout the entire season, we always did a reaction video to NFL and college games. And so every week we talked about stories and scores that happened between pretty much every NFL game got talked about, at least the score mentioned this season, which is a lot. We predicted the winners of all those games, and I'm pretty sure Nate is going to end up winning that contest. It's not officially over yet. Connor's in second place, and Eric and I are quite a ways behind. But, we did a lot of work covering the NFL this season, and I know all of my co-hosts did a great job watching games that maybe they didn't even have a rooting interest in, but they would watch the games and then report stuff back on this podcast. I know, especially in the early weeks, we did that. Then as our team started losing, for me and Eric's sake, we kind of stopped.
Yeah.
We just got frustrated. I mean, it's a lot easier to watch other games when your team's winning, because, you feel good about stuff. You're like, okay, you're feeling good. But when your team's losing, it just makes football in general harder to watch, because you see other teams winning and you're like, dang, why can't that be me? Why can't I be feeling that same excitement? But nonetheless, we've reached the playoffs, and this is going to be kind of like a prediction special episode where we're going to just look at the playoffs from a whole. I'm pretty sure in future episodes, we're going to dissect the games and maybe predict the certain games that come up, because a lot of these are going to be hypothetical games that we talk about, like Super Bowl matchups and stuff like that. But this is just going to be like a broad overview of our projections. We did early season projections, and they went so-so. I predicted the Jags to be in the AFC Championship game, so I got that one wrong. Connor predicted the Falcons to win the Super Bowl, so we've all got some blemishes there. But now that we know the playoff teams, we're going to predict who we think is going to win these games. And I guess we'll start with the AFC. So we'll talk about the two wildcard games first that we know for sure are going to happen, and that's Tennessee at New England and Buffalo at Houston. And you can see here on YouTube, and I'll tell the podcast listeners this as well, I have predicted the Tennessee Titans to beat the New England Patriots and the Houston Texans to beat the Buffalo Bills. I'll switch over to Eric here. He's got the Patriots and the Texans winning. Connor has got the Patriots and Bills, and Nate also has the Patriots and Bills. So we're split evenly between the Bills and Texans, but I am the only one taking Tennessee, and I'll talk about that right now. I guess I'll just start talking about that. The Patriots, the last month of the season, have been very underwhelming, and it's not just Tom Brady. It's the whole team. Brady's obviously I watched a good part of that Miami game, and that pick six was just so uncharacteristic of him. He just threw it, I think, out of desperation, and it was a pick six. Miami is up 10-0 in Foxborough. Crazy, crazy thing. I predicted the Dolphins to win, but I didn't predict it to the Dolphins to jump out 10-0 like that. So I'm not high on New England at all. I think this is the end for Tom Brady in New England. I mean, he's regressed. I don't think anybody can argue he hasn't regressed this season. And it started in that last Super Bowl that he had. He looked pretty bad in that Super Bowl. He's looked bad this season. Their record is pretty good because they've faced a lot of inferior competition throughout the way. But when it comes to the winning teams, I mean, they lost to Baltimore. They lost to Kansas City. They lost to Houston. They were able to beat Buffalo twice, but that's not very good. And then in the NFC, they beat Philly and Dallas, but those aren't really signature wins, especially when the Dallas one was at home, Philly was on the road, and Philly almost had a chance to win that too. It wasn't like they blew anybody out. The only teams they were able to blow out were like the Bengals and Dolphins early in the season, the Jets, with all the quarterbacks that they had at the time. So another thing too, the reason I'm going against New England here is their defense lately has been very bad. I mean, usually this is the time of year when the Patriots seem to get it all together and they start playing their best football this time, but their defense, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, of all people, scored 27 points against this defense. And I'm just concerned because this defense early in the season looked like a god defense. They looked like potentially like the 2000 Ravens type of a defense, 0-2 Bucks, but not anymore. This defense is still good, but when you look at Tennessee is kind of like the opposite of New England. They're coming on strong to the end of the season. They won convincingly against Houston in the final week of the season. I know that they didn't. Houston wasn't playing all their starters, but still they took care of business on the road against a division rival. Is not easy to do. And even the time that they lost to New Orleans, they were pretty close. I think it was a one-score game, and I know they had the lead at one point. I think they jumped out 14-0. So this Tennessee team can put up points. Derrick Henry, I want to say, won the rushing title for the league. So if he's not, he's definitely top 3 in rushing yards. So I really like this Tennessee team right now. And you see they're highlighted green for another game I've got. So I'm high on Tennessee. I think they're the kind of team that can win on the road. I know their defense hasn't been great, but I do like Tennessee's defense, even if the stats don't back it up. I do like the players that they've got, and I like the matchups that they've got. Nobody on New England's offense scares me. Julian Edelman, where has he even been the last couple of weeks? I think he's got all these injuries piled up, and their other receiver, N'Keal Harry, he's a rookie. You can't rely on rookies. And then the rest of their receivers, Sanu and guys I don't even know, they just drop passes all the time. They're like they have the most drops in the NFL. So with all that being said, New England's just a mess right now. They lost to Miami in the final week of the season. I believe when they were favored by 14 points or more or something, they never lost a game at home. And they were like 143 and like 1 when they had a lead entering the fourth quarter at home. So this team has just done very uncharacteristic things for the Patriots. I'm not a fan of them right now. And this playoffs is all about momentum. So the team that's got momentum, I tend to favor, and New England's not coming in with any momentum in my mind. So that's why I've got Tennessee winning. I do think it will be pretty convincingly. I think Tennessee will win by 2 scores in this. And is this going to be the last game of Tom Brady? If I was just to do a bold prediction, I'd say yes, but we'll see after the game. But that's how I feel about this game. I believe the point spread is New England -5, so slight favorites in this one. But Eric, I know you've picked New England here, so explain to me why you think New England's going to win.
Okay, so I definitely am in agreement with Zach here in terms of uh, New England struggling. They're obviously not playing that good right now. But for me, I feel like the Patriots are always a different team come playoff time. And that doesn't mean that that's going to happen this year, because I also, like Zach, I think all the rest of us have it too. Like, I don't have New England getting very far in the playoffs. I only have them winning this game. I don't see them getting past Kansas City. But I know while they lost most of their more marquee matchups, this is something I never thought I'd ever say in my life. But actually, in the game against the Chiefs, they actually had a lot of bad calls that went against them in that game that really surprised me. It's something I wouldn't expect, because we all know Myles Jack wasn't down in the 2017 AFC Championship game, but there were a lot of bad calls that went in the Chiefs' favor in that game. And if those calls go the other way, New England probably wins that game. And then the whole argument of them, not winning any important games, that argument, goes out the window a little bit. And I feel like in the Miami game last week, I felt like, for whatever reason, I want to say that New England underestimated them. And I think they were trying to get too cute early in the game, which was when that pick six happened that Zach talked about. Yeah. And I felt like they were trying to throw the ball a lot and just doing things that they, obviously you have to throw to win in the NFL, but I felt like they were relying way too heavily on that. I mean, they've got a really good dynamic core of running backs, and if they want to get anywhere in the playoffs, they're going to have to rely more on their running game. And as well in the passing game, I mean, Brady's not going to beat you with, deep down the field passes. For one, they don't even really have the weapons to be able to do that. And then two, Brady doesn't have that arm strength, at this age. I mean, he's reminding me a lot right now of when Peyton Manning regressed in his last couple of years. But if the defense can step up, then, which they've done most of the season, I know they haven't been great lately, but then I think they'll be okay for Tennessee. The other edge that I give for the Patriots that probably a lot of people wouldn't talk about is that even though Ryan Tannehill has been playing, fairly well these last few weeks, Bill Belichick has a lot of intel on him since he used to be the Dolphins quarterback. I mean, he used to play, Ryan Tannehill twice every year. And so I think Bill Belichick's going to be able to use that to his advantage. He is a mastermind coach, and I think they're going to be able to get it done. I think this is going to be like a low-scoring game, and I believe both teams are going to really be relying on their running games. So I think that's going to make the game go by quicker. It's going to limit, the number of times each team has the ball. So I think this is going to be more of a low-scoring game, but I'm going to give New England a slight edge of like 20-17. But then I have them getting bounced by the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I don't see them getting far. It's just that the Titans, to me, aren't, while they are kind of hot right now, they still have kind of had that deal where it's like, which Titan team is going to show up? You know what I mean? And so it'll be, I mean, now if the good Titan team shows up, then I'm probably going to be wrong, but they've been on the good end more often than not here lately. And, there is a reason why, Tannehill ultimately, got the boot in Miami. I mean, he has proven throughout most of his career that he is not the greatest. So I don't know if I trust Ryan Tannehill and this Titans team to get it done. But as I said too, I don't see New England getting super far. So I'm not going to be like blown away shocked if Tennessee wins this game. I just don't think they will. And obviously, it's hard for me to root for the Patriots, but I can't root for the Titans either. Like,
as a Jags fan, my dad said this to me. He was like, he actually likes this because no matter what, one of these teams that we hate is going to get
that's true.
bounced. So
that's true. That's
no matter what, one of these teams that we don't like is going to lose. So
that's a good point. That's how I'm going to try and look at it. Thank you for giving me a different perspective on that. But it's going to be hard to watch this game hating both teams because it's like when one team does good, I'm going to be like, dang it. But then when the other team does good, I'm still going to be like, dang it. Like, I'm not going to be happy either way. But I'm going to watch it, so we can analyze it for the podcast. Yeah. I will watch it. Yeah, man. If it was up to me, it would go to like 86 overtimes, and they'd be like, nobody can win, so they're just both eliminated, and the team with the first round bye gets another bye week. Just solve that problem. So that's almost like my mini rant in the way. Like for this episode, I didn't really have a rant planned or anything, but I hate both of these teams so much. They're probably like two of my total least favorites in the NFL. But anyway, sorry, Nate. I know you're a Patriots fan, but sorry, man. I'll let Zach get us on to the next game.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the next one we've got here, Buffalo at Houston. Buffalo coming in as the 5 seed, Houston as the 4 seed. And Eric and myself have Houston winning this game. Connor and Nate have Buffalo winning. And to be honest, this game could go either way to me. I'm not a huge fan of either of these teams, but I guess I just trust Deshaun Watson more than I trust Josh Allen when it comes to this. Houston is going to be at home, and I think this is Bill O'Brien really needs to win this game because it's been a while since the Texans have won a playoff game. It seems like they're in it every year, but they lose. Last year was to the Colts, and they lost at home. I just don't see that happening again. Buffalo, I think, is a pretty good team, but when they face better competition, they don't seem to play as well. And to me, this is the hardest one really to predict because I'm not a fan of either of these teams. This is another like Tennessee New England game. This is much less extreme than that, but I don't know really who I'm going to root for in this game. But at least one of them will be eliminated. But I guess I've got Houston winning just because they're home field and Deshaun Watson, and the defense is seeming to play a little bit better, but neither of these teams really inspires me that much. And I guess Buffalo just inspires me a little bit less than Houston. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the rooting interest, I mean, this is an easy one. I'll definitely be rooting for the Bills, but I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them or anything, but I guess I'm just more neutral with them, whereas I hate Houston. So, and I really don't want to hear from the Texans fans at my job if Houston wins. So I will be rooting for the Bills, but I did pick Houston because, I mean, same thing. Like, you look at the quarterbacks, you obviously trust Deshaun Watson more than Josh Allen. I mean, they're both mobile, but when you trust with the arm, you look at Deshaun Watson as the bigger threat. And when you look at the receivers these teams have, there's not really anybody on the Bills, that scares you. And so I think whereas the Texans have DeAndre Hopkins, so I think the Texans are going to be able to bring a more balanced attack to the table. And I think they will be able to get it done. But Buffalo definitely has the better defense, though. So if I'm giving an edge for the Bills as to like why people would pick the Bills, it's definitely because of their defense. Their defense has been lights out this year. I haven't really got to see too many of their games, but the main one I did get to see was when they played the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, and the Cowboys went right down the field on their first drive and got a touchdown. And I was like, oh man, like Dallas is maybe going to have like a really good game here, but then Buffalo's defense like pretty much shut them out for the rest of the game. I mean, they were extraordinary in that game. So if Buffalo wins, it's going to be because their defense like forces a key turnover or something to either be like a pick six or something that gives them really good field position that can give them the edge. But if their defense isn't able to give them a really good opportunity like that, then I think Houston wins. I think this one will be a close one, like my prediction with the New England Tennessee game, but I think it'll be a little bit higher scoring. So I'll say Houston wins like 28-24.
Okay. All right, so we'll stick with the AFC, and then we'll go into our hypotheticals because Eric and I both have Houston advancing, but I've got Tennessee and he's got New England, so they've got different matchups. So I've got Tennessee versus Baltimore, and I've got Houston versus Kansas City, and this is going to be a shocker to a lot of people, but I've got Tennessee beating Baltimore on the road, and it's just a gut feeling I've got. It's just a gut feeling that Baltimore's not going to be ready for Tennessee. I think Tennessee is the type of team that can win on the road. I think they can. I think Tennessee is like perfectly built against Baltimore because they kind of do what Baltimore does. I guess Baltimore does a little bit better, but they do have Derrick Henry, and I think he's going to be a workhorse in this type of a game. And if they do that, then you got to limit Baltimore's offensive possessions. And Tennessee, if they can get a couple of turnovers, I like them. To me, I might sound like an idiot, but it seems like these every year there's one team that gets really highly rated and then they just like fall on their face in the playoffs. And to me, that's Baltimore. They've got, they're going to be off for basically 3 weeks before this starts. They didn't play, a lot of their stars didn't play in this week's game. And then, next week they have the bye. So they're going to have a long rest. Is it going to be rest versus rust? That sometimes that's a factor in this. I just think Tennessee's going to be this team that surprises everybody in the playoffs. And they're like, how did they get here? But Tennessee, while I don't like them, certainly, I just think that their team is really suited for the playoffs. I think this is the perfect game for them to win. It's going to be close because Baltimore is still very good, but I can see Tennessee winning by like a field goal here. I do like their defense, and I can't really give you any, solid facts because Baltimore is better in every way, but Tennessee just seems to be that team this year, I think, that has it going in hot to the playoffs, coming off a win at New England. I mean, they're going to have all the, momentum on their side, and I just don't trust Baltimore in this setting. I think Baltimore is still a really good team, obviously, but to me, I just think it's too good to be true. So I'm going with Tennessee here. And then I'll tell you about the other game here. So Houston at Kansas City. I think this is going to be a blowout win for Kansas City. I know Houston actually beat Kansas City in the regular season, but KC is also kind of like Tennessee. They are getting on a winning streak at the end of the season, and I don't believe that Houston can beat Kansas City twice in the same year. It's gonna be at Arrowhead, and in those conditions, I do like Mahomes better. And another thing too, the Chiefs defense has really turned it around lately. I know they started out the season pretty pathetic, but as of late, they've been playing a lot better. They've been forcing turnovers, getting a lot of sacks, and I still like Mahomes better than Watson. I like the coaching of Andy Reid better than Bill O'Brien. It's at home for Kansas City. To me, Kansas City absolutely cannot lose this game, and I just don't think Houston's really that good of a team. So this is where Houston needs to end of their line, and Kansas City's going to move on after this. And then I'll talk about my AFC Championship games. Now Tennessee and Kansas City. This is where kind of like the magical ride ends for Tennessee. I've got Kansas City winning against Tennessee. Even though Tennessee beat them earlier in the season, it's kind of like Houston. I don't think they can do it twice. And it's going to be at home for Kansas City. I like basically everything, the same stuff I said for Houston. Losing to Kansas City is the same reasoning here. And also every Cinderella story does usually come to an end before the championship. So this is where the favorite comes back and wins. So Tannehill might have a bad game. Mahomes might have a insane game. So either way, I like Kansas City to move on and represent the AFC. So it's just a lot of gut feelings I've got, and can't really explain really why, but it's just how sometimes it's just how you feel a game is going to go, even if it's not predicted to be that way by most people. So that's why I've got Baltimore losing. Not going to be most. I bet 9 out of 10 are going to have Baltimore winning, but to me, it's just too good to be true. So I'm gonna. That's how the rest of the AFC is going to go, according to me. So I've got Kansas City winning the AFC. I'll let Eric talk about his rest of the bracket for AFC.
I like that our first rounds were different, because then it allows us to provide different, perspectives for what could possibly happen. So, with the way my scenario ended up, I would have Baltimore versus Houston, and I've got Baltimore in this game for the same reason that Zach has the Chiefs over Houston in his example. I just think Baltimore is a way better team than Houston. I don't trust Houston's defense to be able to stop Lamar Jackson. I think their offense will be able to generate some points against this Ravens defense, but the Ravens defense is pretty good too. So for me, if that ends up being a game that does happen in the second round, then I would give Baltimore like a 34-17 edge. Like they'd win by a good amount, I think. And so then my other matchup would be the Chiefs versus the Patriots. And I just don't see New England getting past them in Arrowhead. Like I said, I only have New England beating the Titans just because I don't trust the Titans as much as Zach does. But I don't know, man. For me, I feel like this is where New England season's going to come to an end. My only concern for the Chiefs going forward, and which I guess I'll explain this a little more when I get to the AFC Championship game. But I trust Mahomes to be able to get it going. I know New England's defense has been able to give him trouble, it seems like, but I think he's finally going to get over that edge at home and have a monster game against New England. So this is another game, just like my Ravens-Houston pick, where I just don't see it being that close. And I think Kansas City will win fairly easily as well here. So that's going to set me up for my bracket, where I have the Ravens and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But I'm a full believer in the Baltimore Ravens. I usually tend to not trust teams that have a mobile quarterback and rely on the QB running so much, because that usually tends to fail. It tends to work for a little while, but then it usually crashes and burns. But I don't see this happening with this Ravens team, because they have so many weapons for Lamar Jackson to be able to utilize. I know Mark Ingram's been injured, but the reports are that he will be at least questionable by the time they play their first game. So if he's able to go, that's a big weapon. And they have those 3 tight ends. And I know I've ranted about this before, for the Jags.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did the Ravens? I'm like, how did the Ravens have 3 starting caliber tight ends, and the Jaguars have people that would be on practice squads on most teams? You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous, dude. How good their tight ends are. And that's the thing, man. It's when he does these RPOs, it's so hard to figure out what they're gonna do, because whereas when RG3 was with the Redskins, you knew more often than not that he was probably gonna run the ball, but run the ball himself. Or when Mike Vick, was with the Falcons, you knew he was probably gonna run more often than not, because him and RG3, they didn't have the same type of weapons that Lamar Jackson has in Baltimore right now. And so that's just what makes the Ravens so scary good for me. And then the reason why I've got them beating the Chiefs is in that last game against the Chargers, the Chiefs actually had some injuries in their secondary. And like one of them was their starting safety who started every game. And so that's going to throw their dynamic off a little bit. I don't think it will affect them as much in the New England game because New England does not have as dynamic of an offense as Baltimore, but I just don't think KC's defense is going to be able to stop Baltimore here. Like, if it does end up being Baltimore and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, I anticipate that it will be a pretty high-scoring game. But I think the Ravens have the better defense to be able to contain Mahomes than the Chiefs have to be able to contain Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Even though the Chiefs' defense has been playing better, I do agree with that. But I just don't think they're going to have enough. So for that game, I could see it being like 37-31 or something like that. Like, I think it'll be close, high scoring, but Ravens get the edge and get into the Super Bowl. So it's going to be a intense AFC playoffs, though, man, to say the least. I'm excited. We haven't even got to the NFC yet.
Yeah, no, the AFC is so wild, man. Like, and I do hope that is the championship matchup. That's going to be such a fun rematch. KC actually won in the regular season in Kansas City, so this would be in Baltimore, a rematch game. I would be really happy for that. But here are the rest of the podcasters' picks. So Connor's got New England beating Tennessee. He's got Buffalo beating Houston. This next matchup, he's got Baltimore beating Buffalo and Kansas City beating New England. So kind of like Eric, KC versus Baltimore, but he's got Kansas City winning instead. So same matchup, different winner. And then Nate has got Baltimore beating Buffalo in the second round, Kansas City beating New England. His team, he picked his own team to lose here. I'm kind of a little bit surprised by that. But he's got the same matchup as Eric and Connor do, KC and Baltimore, and he's got Baltimore winning. So good diversity of picks between the four of us. I'm the only one with Baltimore not being in the championship game, but I mean, if they were there, it wouldn't surprise me that much. But it's just this is what I think is going to happen. So we'll get to the NFC now, the second half of this episode. So we'll talk first about the games that are for sure happening, and then we'll kind of go back and then just figure out the rest of the NFC after that. So Minnesota coming in as the 6th seed against New Orleans, the 3 seed. I think this New Orleans team is so good right now on offense, and Minnesota is kind of stumbling into these playoffs. I know they were resting people in that final game, but before that, they lost to Green Bay in a really pivotal game, and they lost to Green Bay earlier in the season too, so they got swept by the Packers, and I'm not sure if they really played anybody else. I think they beat the Eagles, who were also in the playoffs, and maybe they beat the Chiefs, but that was back when Mahomes was injured. So this Minnesota team, to me, is kind of stumbling into the playoffs. I'm not sure about Dalvin Cook's status, which that's huge. If Dalvin Cook doesn't play, it's, increase the score margin for increase the margin of victory for New Orleans, because he is their main offensive weapon. I know they've got Diggs and Thielen, but they are really a running team first. And also, I can't trust Kirk Cousins, man. I just can't. He never wins the big games, and I think he's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but I just can't trust him, and he's never, made me have confidence for him to win a playoff game on the road in the Superdome. I mean, to me, this is going to be this is the least intriguing, or not least intriguing, but least I'm going to have the least amount of fun watching this, I feel like, because this is going to be such a one-sided game. And I'm really high on New Orleans. I think Michael Thomas is the best receiver in football. I think This Saints team at home is a different animal. So I've got New Orleans winning. And then we go to the 5 versus 4 matchup. So Seattle against the Eagles. It's going to be in Philly, but Seattle beat the Eagles in Philly earlier this season. I know it was a 1-score game, but I just trust Russell Wilson more than I trust Carson Wentz. And Seattle, while they are banged up going into this, they're not as banged up as Philly. I saw something today where Philly only has 3 offensive starters playing that were starters in week 1. So it's just crazy that 8 players on their offense that started week 1 are hurt. So this, to me, Philly's just so decimated. Even defensively, I know they lost Malik Jackson, and their secondary's been kind of banged up too. So I do really like the Seahawks team as well. I think they got robbed of that last of the NFC West Championship game, so to say, in Seattle. I thought they got robbed with that pass interference that was a no call. So I think the Seahawks are more deserving in this game. I think they're the better team. It's going to be kind of close, though, because it is in Philly. I'll give them, Philly's going to have the advantage for that end of the ass, for that end. But when it comes down to it, I like Seattle in a 1-score game here. I trust Russell Wilson a lot in the playoffs. Carson Wentz has never been in a playoff game before. Maybe it's going to be too much for him with not enough help. And I do like the Seahawks defense too. The way that they were able to hold the 49ers at the end of the game there to give their team a chance to come back and win it. I definitely appreciate that. So I've got Seattle winning in a 1-score game, New Orleans winning by a couple scores here, and then I'll go over to Eric's bracket so he can answer these questions. So Eric, talk about your winners.
Yeah, so I also have the Saints beating the Vikings, and I mean I've got to agree too that this is, out of the wild card games, this one probably intrigues me the least as well. I'm in the same boat, man. I don't trust Kirk Cousins. Ask 100 football fans, like, who do you trust more, Drew Brees or Kirk Cousins? Like, probably everybody
101 out of 100.
Probably everybody except for like Kirk Cousins' dad is going to say that they'll trust Drew Brees more. So I try, especially if Dalvin Cook can't go, like you said. I mean, I'm in full agreement here that I just don't trust Minnesota to get this done. But I mean, obviously, they play every game for a reason. You never know what can happen. But I would be, if we were doing like a survival thing for this, like,
yeah,
the Saints would be my lock. Or if I was going to like Connor and do a lock, like that would be my lock. But then for the Eagles and Seahawks, like, I think I'm the only one that picked the Eagles. I'm kind of like basing this kind of off of like your reason for why you have like the Titans beating the Ravens. I mean, if you look on paper, you would definitely say that the Seahawks are the better team, but I don't know, man. It seems like every time there's like an 8-8 or 9-7 team that wins their division and they get the home game over like a 10-6 or an 11-5 team, that the lower record team that has the home game like always seems to win for some reason. And I don't know. Like, I'm going with that. I mean, obviously these are two completely different teams. This is going to be a different game than those other games, but I don't know. I just for some reason have this weird feeling that Philly will win because of their home field advantage, even though they're not deserving of having the home game based on their record. They still have it. So I don't know. I guess Zach kind of like called me out over the past week when we were talking about our college bowl game predictions of like always playing it safe with my picks. That probably would have been something he would have like roasted me for if Zach was Zach had won the roast. But so this is my like take a chance pick, where I'm like, okay. I don't know. It's just like same thing as your Titans over the Ravens thing. Like, I just have this weird feeling that Philly is going to win.
Yeah.
So we'll see if I'm right. But that and the thing I mentioned of like the times when the lower record teams have the home game always winning, like those are my only two reasons for basing this. So we'll see. Well, I guess my other reason too is that, you know, Seattle has been in a lot of one-score games this year that they've won. I mean, you could argue that that's a good thing, but it seems like their ability to win all these one-score games every time is gonna like run out eventually. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna have to lose. Yeah. I mean, they lost to San Francisco, but there was some BS involved in that, and I was rooting for San Francisco to win that game, but it just seemed like there was some BS with that. So, oh man, sorry. I gotta make a shout out to myself here. I totally called this WWE's predictability, but there was a wedding going on, and I totally predicted that someone was going to be inside the cake and jump out and attack somebody, and I was right. He's doing it. So just in that moment, I had to say that. But yeah. I feel like Seattle's luck with winning like almost all these one-score games is going to have to run out eventually, and I'm thinking maybe this is it. So we'll see. So yeah, man. So that's mine there, and then I know we're going to go to the rest of the NFC bracket, so I'll let you give yours here.
Okay, so I've got Seattle. Like I said, I've got them beating Philly, so they would be matched up with San Francisco, and then I've got New Orleans matched up against Green Bay. And I'll start with the first matchup, Seattle against San Francisco. So this would be the third time these teams meet, and the first one went down to the wire in overtime. The second one went down to the last 10 seconds of regular game time. So no matter what, I think we all can agree it's going to be a really, really close between Seattle and San Francisco. And I'm going to give the edge to Seattle, basically just because of Russell Wilson. I do think that the Seahawks are going to learn from their mistakes. And also San Francisco, their defense to me seems to be getting a little bit overrated. We saw the Falcons score against them at the end of the game, and it almost happened in the Seattle game. So they are really, and also that New Orleans game went down to the end too. Seattle's been in a lot of one-score games recently, San Francisco's been in a lot of one-score games as well. Even the game against the Rams that they had. So when it comes down to this, I know San Francisco's a very formidable foe, but I just like Seattle in this instance. Marshawn Lynch is back. Is it going to be reminiscent of that, of those deep playoff runs that they had back in the past? I don't know. I know Sherman's in San Francisco now, but to me, this is also a little bit of a rooting interest here because I do want Seattle to win this. But I feel like they are going to be really motivated to come back and beat San Francisco because I feel like they feel like that they should have won that last game. And they did beat San Francisco in California the first time these two teams met in overtime. And really, I don't even think it should have gone to overtime. I thought Wilson made an uncharacteristic mistake to even make it as close as it was. But San Francisco did miss a kick, so it could have gone either way. But this is going to be a close one, but this would be a really fun game to see. It's kind of like the Baltimore-Kansas City potential matchup. This would be, and I know these teams have already played twice, but I would not mind seeing this for a third time. And I've got Seattle winning. It's, like I said, it'll be by a hair, but I would just rather put my money on Seattle than San Francisco, but could go either way for sure. The next game I'm much more confident about, though, and that's New Orleans and Green Bay. Green Bay, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but someone said on Twitter, Green Bay is the worst 13-3 team of all time. And I don't know if that's true necessarily, but they are definitely in discussion for that because this team has not looked very good. I mean, I was watching some of the Aaron Rodgers incompletions in that last game against the very, very bad Lions team, and it was just bad. I mean, he was way overthrowing his targets. Green Bay, to me, really hasn't played anybody outside of Minnesota that they've beaten. I mean, let's look at this. They got demolished by San Francisco. They lost at the end to Philly. They didn't get to play Seattle. They didn't get to play New Orleans. They beat Kansas City without Patrick Mahomes. So to me, I think Green Bay kind of lucked into this role. And also, I know it's going to be at Lambeau, but it seems like in the playoffs that doesn't seem to matter as much as you would think. I know their winning record there isn't as good as you would think it would be. The Packers, to me, they're not a playoff team. They've got a good record, but they're not built for the playoffs. This defense is definitely better than past Green Bay defenses, but to me, the offense isn't there, and New Orleans is just much better at every aspect. They've got the better quarterback. I think they've got the better coach. I think they've got better weapons. I think their defense is going to match Green Bay's defense at least, maybe be a little bit better. So the only thing really going for Green Bay is their home field advantage. And that I don't think is that high of an advantage. It'd be even worse for them if they were in New Orleans, obviously. But I've got New Orleans winning this one pretty easily, I think. And then it leads me to Seattle and New Orleans. And I can't pick against New Orleans at home in the playoffs. I just can't. So that's why I've got New Orleans here. It's going to be a really good game, though, between these two teams. And I really wouldn't mind seeing either team win because I do like both these teams. But I've got New Orleans winning. Just seems to me like this is their time. This is their year. Kind of like LSU. The state of Louisiana is doing pretty good this year in football. So this just seems like it's New Orleans time. I like their matchups on offense. They've got the better running back in this compared to Marshawn Lynch. I know Marshawn Lynch is great, but he hasn't played this season, and who knows what his body's going to be feeling like at this point in the playoffs. And I'm a fan of Alvin Kamara, so I do like the Saints to win this game at home, barring a catastrophe from the refs here. I guess New Orleans winning this, and then I'll talk about my Super Bowl here. So New Orleans against Kansas City. I just think New Orleans is the more complete team. Kansas City, I think, probably has more weapons, but I've got New Orleans in this. It's just hard to pick Andy Reid to win a Super Bowl with the way that he coaches. I mean, I've always thought that he's like the Mike D'Antoni of the NBA. He's all about the regular season. He's all about the stats, the flashy plays, the highlight dunks in the NBA and the no-look passes by Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a very good similarity if you were to compare NBA and NFL teams. I think Kansas City is like the Rockets of the NFL, and New Orleans I think would be I would say New Orleans is kind of like the Spurs. They're always a consistently good team. They're always in the playoffs. They're a little bit older, but they've got weapons. They're kind of sneaky. So I've got New Orleans. Obviously not the Spurs of this year, but that's kind of my NFL NBA comparison.
Good comparisons there, actually. I liked that. I didn't anticipate you going in that direction, but no, I like both of those comparisons.
Yeah, so I kind of knew the Kansas City one before because I've always kind of thought that, but the New Orleans one I kind of just had to think up on the fly of what NBA team that would be kind of like. And Spurs, I think, is a good fit for them. So I do like New Orleans in this game. Could it be the end of Drew Brees after this, going out as a champion? I don't know, but that's my scenario here. I've got New Orleans over Kansas City. So we'll wrap this up, and I'll let Eric talk about the rest of his NFC and then ultimately his Super Bowl.
I will say, Zach, I do like your Super Bowl prediction because when we started the season, I actually had the Chiefs and the Saints in the Super Bowl. So if that happens, I will be looking like a huge genius. But anyway, but that's actually not who I'm going with for the playoffs, though. So for me, with the Saints and Green Bay Packers, I'm going to start with that one because that's the one game where Zach and I had the same matchup in our hypotheticals. But I also have the Saints. I don't trust Green Bay. And another example that, just to add on to what Zach was talking about with Green Bay, is they really should have lost to the Lions both times they played them, because they played very poorly yesterday, and Detroit was winning the whole game. I thought Green Bay was going to blow it. I was pretty shocked by that, and then the first time they played, if it weren't for those, garbage hands to the face calls on Trey Flowers, like, Detroit probably would have won that. I mean, that was almost 2 losses to the Lions. I mean, and the Lions started out kind of hot, but I mean, they faded really fast. I mean, because they were one of my surprise teams early on in the season after like the third or fourth week when they almost beat the Chiefs. I was like, man, the Lions are looking good this year. And then it fell off the map after that. But I guess I was too positive about them. So next year, I'm just going to say the Jags are going to go 0-16, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, I just don't trust Green Bay. I mean, I would have to think of all the teams that went 13-3 to see if, like, I thought they were the worst one. But I mean, Green Bay's good, and they are at home, so they have a chance because of that. But I still think New Orleans is going to beat them. I am in agreement with Zach that they're the better team all around, and they have had troubles in the road in the past, but I think they're going to be able to get it done here. And then my second round matchup is, instead of 49ers Seahawks, is going to be 49ers Eagles. And while I had the Eagles beating the Seahawks with the home field advantage, I just would not trust them to be able to go into San Francisco and get it done. I mean, San Francisco had that loss to the Falcons, but the Falcons surprisingly got kind of hot towards the end of the year and started playing much better. And of course, they beat the Jags, which isn't, saying a whole lot, but and the Bucks, but they won a lot of their games to end the season, so that might give them momentum for next year. But so I don't look at that loss as badly as a lot of other people might. But the one thing for the 49ers, though, is they are going to have to start getting a little more separation at the end of these games, because they can't keep having all these games like come down to the final 30 seconds, because same with Seattle. I mean, their luck will run out eventually if they keep doing that. But I've got them beating Philly, though. I don't think they would have too much of a problem with them, which would then lead me to San Francisco and New Orleans. I don't know if I'd be able to trust New Orleans to go on the road 2 playoff games in a row, which would, if my situation plays out, is what they would have to do. And especially with the second one being all the way out on the West Coast. I mean, they had an epic game against the 49ers earlier in the season, which, I mean, that was insane. It was like 48-46 or something like that. I mean, that was crazy. I don't know if it would be, I think the teams would adjust to each other, and then this matchup would not be, as much of a shootout like that, like it was. But even though I definitely would trust, even though I'd give Drew Brees the edge over Jimmy Garoppolo, I am a big fan of what the 49ers have done this year. I am very impressed with them, and it's hard for me to pick against the Saints because Drew Brees is my favorite player in the NFL. So I've always had a rooting interest for the Saints. So this is definitely not like a favoritism bias or a homer pick here. Like, if I was doing that, I would definitely pick the Saints. So I would be happy to, if this situation does play out, I would definitely be happier if the Saints won. But I don't know, man. I'm a believer in what the 49ers have been doing, but I do have them running out, though, in the Super Bowl. I know the Ravens and 49ers met this year, and it was a pretty low-scoring game, although the weather was really bad in that game. But I don't know, man. As I said earlier, just the way Lamar Jackson has been playing this year, and they've got solid corners. They've got a pretty solid defense. They've got a good, solid defensive line. Like, their ability to throw you off with what they're doing with whether they're going to run or pass in those RPOs is just scary good.
Yeah.
So if a team is able to adjust to that and figure it out, then, somehow then, or, say like if Lamar Jackson gets injured or something, then, that would obviously be horrible. But, barring like something catastrophic, that's my Super Bowl. And I know it's probably, it's a little safe having both of the, the number one seeds being in the Super Bowl, but that tends to be usually how it goes, or it'd be like a number one versus a number two. Like it's not. I saw this stat the other day or yesterday when the Chiefs got to get the bye instead of the Patriots, that teams that have the number one or number two seed get to the Super Bowl 80% of the time, whereas teams that have to play a first round game only get to the Super Bowl 20% of the time. So it's just such an advantage to have that first round bye and have the home field advantage. So that's why I've got my situation playing out the way that I do. And I'm a big believer in, what the Ravens and 49ers are both doing. And that's why I see them getting there and having a rematch. So some of my scenarios, I wouldn't be as excited to see play out. Like I really would not prefer to see San Francisco and the Eagles play. Like I'd much rather be 49ers Seahawks again. I'm on board with Zach on that. I would be having much more fun if that were the case. But this is the beauty of the playoffs, man. Like you've got the best of the best teams in there from the get-go. It's not like the NBA where, you've got like a team that went like 60-20 playing a team that went like 40-40 and you already know like what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's why I love the NFL, man. It's always going to be my favorite sport. So I like basketball too, but you got the best of the best here, as much as I hate to say that with two AFC South teams not being the Jags in it, but I'm still excited for it. And I guess that's my final thought on everything. So I'll be looking forward to keeping our viewers updated every week on what happens and analyzing the results, and hopefully I won't look like an idiot with my predictions.
No, I mean, you got your grounds covered, I think, because you got Baltimore and San Francisco in this, but then also if Kansas City and New Orleans go, then it's like, oh, you can say from the start of the season that was your prediction. So you really got your grounds covered.
That's true. I mean, really based on my preseason predictions, I probably should have had the Chiefs and Saints getting in the Super Bowl, but we had other podcasters that did that, so I would have had like exactly the same as them. And obviously at the beginning of the season, like nobody would have thought the 49ers were going to be in this position, and nobody thought Lamar Jackson was going to be doing this well, you know what I mean? So that's why I've got them in over the Chiefs or the Saints. But, regardless of what happens, as long as it's not like, I guess the worst case scenario for me, like rooting interest wise, would be if it was like the Titans and the Packers in the Super Bowl. That would, man, that would suck. I would not like that at all.
That wouldn't even be a good game, too. I feel like you saw that.
No. So is that what would be before we go? What would be your worst? I guess what would be your best rooting interest and worst rooting interest, like for the Super Bowl?
Okay,
like you have your dream scenario and your worst scenario.
All right. So my dream scenario would be Kansas City versus Seattle would be my dream scenario. I really wouldn't be upset if either of those teams won. I'd still go for Seattle, but my least scenario would probably be New England and Green Bay.
Yeah, that would be pretty bad too.
Yeah, so, but at least New England Green Bay would be a little bit more intriguing of a matchup with like the whole Brady versus Rodgers. Whereas if it was like Tennessee, it'd be like, Tannehill, like, and I can't stand Titans, man. Like, I'd actually, you know what? I might change it to Tennessee, because if New England wins another Super Bowl, as bad as that would be, it's like, okay, it's just another Super Bowl. But if Tennessee wins one, oh my God, the
Titans cannot win a Super Bowl before the Jags.
Yeah,
so, like that cannot happen.
So I'll change that to Titans Green Bay like you did. Even though I probably dislike the Patriots a little bit more. It would just mean so much more for the Titans to win a Super Bowl, and I would not like that. So,
oh God, yeah,
so
dude,
that would be my nightmare scenario. But what would be your dream scenario then, Eric?
My dream scenario would actually probably be my preseason prediction of Chiefs and Saints, not just because that was my preseason prediction, but I mean, I like Patrick Mahomes and I'm okay like with the Chiefs, and like Susan's family are Chiefs fans, and so I would be happy for them like if the Chiefs got in. And then also like I'm a big Drew Brees fan, as previously mentioned, so I would love for the Saints to be able to get another Super Bowl. I mean, the NFC teams for the most part, like other than the Packers, and for me, I'm not huge on the Seahawks, but most of the teams in the NFC, like I'd be okay if they got in there. So but the Saints would definitely be
who we all
yeah. I mean, that would be interesting though. I mean, but see, if Minnesota gets in and wins, we can be like, look, man, Kirk Cousins was crapping the bed the first like 6 weeks of the season, and then we called him out. And look what happened. I mean, he turned it around. So he has Clutch Crew Sports to thank for that. So
pay us to get a good get a good whatever the opposite of like a curse is, like a good vibe or something for your sports team.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, these NFL, we can be like, okay, if you want, Eric to rant about you to like make you do better, that's so many dollars. If you want, Zach's analytical input to show why you're not doing good and why you need to be better, that's a certain amount of dollars. And then if you want Connor to like lock you to win the Super Bowl, then that's so many dollars. We can have different services, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
this is a lot of doing this with you guys. I mean, because like we all have our opinions and stuff, and a lot of times we agree, but when we disagree, it's a lot of fun too to like explain why we think each other are wrong sometimes. Like, but we're not gonna like go crazy at each other or anything, So and I can obviously I get a lot of what you're saying too, and you probably.
Yeah, I understood a lot of but like when you were giving your points, I wasn't like, oh my God, Zach is such an idiot. So, like, you know what I mean? Like even with the Titans beating the Ravens, I mean, while I don't think that would happen, I mean that the Titans would have a lot of momentum, if they beat the Patriots and then heading into ball. I mean, so even though like while I don't see that happening, I mean, it very well could. I mean, that's the thing about the NFL, man. Anything could happen. I mean, you're like. Week 3 prediction of the Dolphins over the Patriots was a little out there, but like for the most part, even picking the picks that don't look like they would be the best pick, like can still happen. I mean, that's the beauty of the NFL. Like, whereas like in the NBA, I mean, if like I don't know, I'm having a brain for if like trying to think of like if the Hawks were going to LA to play the Lakers, like. Do you think anybody's going to believe you if you say the Hawks are going to win that game? Like, you know what I mean? Whereas, like, exactly. I mean, but whereas in the NFL, even like, the Bengals could go into, one of these better teams, and it's not very likely, but it could, possibly happen. They would have to have a lot of things go right for them, but. But like the Bengals beating the Ravens is more likely than the Hawks beating the Lakers. I mean, especially especially with the playoffs, like an NBA with it being a 7-game series, like you wouldn't believe that the Hawks would be able to do that. You know what I mean? So,
well, also another thing too about the NFL that I really like is you can get a team like the 49ers who last year was drafting number 2 overall. They had the second worst record in the NFL. And now they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. That virtually never happens in basketball, where you get a team dead last to jump up to first. I mean, and it seems to happen in football on a regular basis. There's always one team that does that, it seems like, every year. So, and that usually it's like half the playoff teams are new also from the year before. So,
Yeah, I mean, assuming like the Bengals, like if they like draft Joe Burrow, and then like if with the Dolphins having all of those picks, like both of those teams could maybe be good next year. Like it could definitely happen, even though they were both like laughing stocks for a majority of this season. Like it can happen. So come on, Jacksonville, let's go.
Yeah, it's all
I have a lot of fun with it, man. Like I'm glad we get to do this. So I'm glad I got to. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do this episode with the trip coming up, but I'm glad I was able to do it. It was a lot of fun. So,
yeah, no, it was good. And I was honestly, I was like, before this started, I was like, oh man, like it sucks that we can't have Nate and Connor on because they were originally supposed to be on this episode too, but just today we found out they couldn't. But I mean, it was almost kind of a blessing for that because you and I had a lot more time to talk about each game and really give more reasons, more analysis for ourselves instead of sharing the time with 4 people. So I was, I didn't realize, but I was like rambling on and on, like at some of these games. Like I was I haven't heard Eric talking in a while, but I feel like I had to say that stuff, so.
Yeah, you can't just be like, oh, I think this team's going to win because of one player, and then okay, now I'm turning it over to the next person. Like, you know what I mean? Like you gotta be able to break it down and explain it. So yeah, this was a good episode, man. I hope the listeners will enjoy it. And if you've listened to it and made it to this point, I mean, let us know your predictions. Like, let us know like between, myself and Zach, like who you agree with the most, disagree with the most, or maybe you agree with one on half of it and disagree on the other half or whatever. Like, we're open to hear what, you guys think. So let us know. Maybe we'll get something on Twitter going here and see what people think. So,
yeah. And speaking of Twitter, man, I almost forgot too. Like, I put up some Twitter polls after our last stories episode to see what you guys thought. And it was interesting. I think the majority of people said that Jason Garrett was the reason the Cowboys did bad, and that was Nate's original topic. This is something I'm going to try and do more of, is put polls out about our topics so we can discuss in the episode afterward, the poll on Twitter, to see what people agree with when it comes to these topics. Like the Jameis Winston thing, I think was like split. And then the other one was about Antonio Brown. That was also split, but I think the more people said that they think he'd come back than be out of the NFL. So I almost forgot about that there. I was meaning to do that, but with the technology issues, I don't have the full display of tabs that I normally do to flip through the tabs and everything. But this, nonetheless, though, it's. I feel like this is a good time to wrap this up. But
yeah, for sure, man.
Hopefully, everybody has a happy New Year. And Eric, I hope you have fun on your trip, man. Send me some pictures. That SeaWorld.
Picks will be going up on Twitter, at least for the basketball game, for sure. So yeah, man, I'm excited. So if you listen to this, thank you. And I'm not sure when we're doing the next episode. I may not be in it because of the trip. I don't know, but I guess Zach will announce that later.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this and have a great rest of your guys' day.
Peace.